Hello, people, and all you collective of light bearers, special thanks to you. This is going to be my first real, longer video. The night one didn't turn out the way I thought it would. This one is going to be more about my story and why I think I can do what I'm doing. And because it's hard for me to look at the camera, I'm just going to show you the surroundings that I'm in right now after a while of just meditating and thinking. So, my story starts off in a kind of odd way, but understandable for the type of people my parents are. And I think it's hard to understand why a person is born until you understand their parents. And you won't even understand why a person is raised the way they are unless you know the way their parents were raised and how they were taught to teach. So I'm going to start off with telling my parents' story. And the one that most pertains to me is my dad's. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of the details, but my dad was raised in a cult that his parents helped to found. And they worked the people in the cult and got the payment from the work and put it towards the community, which sounds all right because the people were getting living quarters and food, and they were getting all kinds of social interaction that people like. But in the end, freedom was becoming limited because at first it was good people and the rules were to be good. And then it became good people and the rules were to obey whatever the good people said, and everybody else was bad. So it went downhill really quickly. And there was a lot of taking scriptural truths and taking them to the extremes. So my dad grew up. He was born he was born in America, but he grew up in South America, and because their visas, he went all over the place, and they were working and having to support a whole community, and his dad was the main deal of it, and they did a lot of good there. And at first it was fine, and he had a happy life until he was 9 years old. And 9 years old is a special time in child development, and that's where they really need their father. And my dad is a Leo. So the idea of father and nurture is very important. But anyways, it is always important at that age. And my granddad was accused of doing stuff that we do not know the details of because it was a cult and they have all kinds of, it was just talked about, and he was kicked out of South America and not a leader anymore, and broke up my dad's whole family. And that's what they did. And that's when it started going downhill. They started breaking up families. And they started thinking it was their job to control what other families believed. Instead of having it like a mutual, it would be cool if it was this is our main guidelines, like an HOA, but if you don't like it, you got to leave. But it was no, if you don't like it, we're actually gonna affect you physically. And it completely messed up my dad's thinking, made him very defensive, and put him into defense mode. And psychologists talk about that, about defense mode and what that is. So he went in defense mode, and at that time it was the 90s and early 2000s, and they had moved him up to the States where they were working him like a dog. And my mom, so the short story for her is she was raised goody two-shoes by my grandfather on her side was rich. And to the point where, but he was frugal as well, of course, like most rich people are. So he just stacked wealth. Anyways, my mom decided to like rebel against her family, and she turned to Jesus and had a spiritual awakening. And she was gung-ho for Jesus, and she would only read the Bible and do her chores, but that was it. Like, she was really fire about reading the Bible and praying and stuff, but also still an Old Testament almost mindset of defense and different things. But she was still good. But she heard of this place where people lived in unity and loved and did good. And that was the cult that she ended up becoming a part of, that my dad was in. And she worked in the kitchens and things of that cult. And she was so goody two-shoes that it was actually a bet that my dad couldn't get her. So people bet him like $1,000 that he couldn't get my mom to marry him in the community. And of course that was like crazy money, because they didn't actually get money from the cult. They were just working their butts off. So he was like, all right, bet. And he, of course, got my mom for utter persuasion and ridiculous stunts of lies, acting goody two-shoes like she was for the community. Yeah, so that was the basis of their relationship. Not total truth. But God can use everything for good, of course. So my dad has to wake my mom up at night and sneak her out of the community. And my grandma across the other side of the nation in Pennsylvania flies them from California to Pennsylvania. And they get married, but my grandma will only marry them if my dad, who is really a freeloader at this point, will go back to the community for the support. So that's what they do. And I was born in the community, in this cult. Now, I was very little, but we moved after that. So, born in Virginia, moved to Pennsylvania, and struggled because my dad could not be in the cult anymore. They could not stand my mom, who was actually too religious for the cult. She actually took scripture as a whole more than the cult, so it was too religious for them. And they were just too focused on the human aspect and just working people to death. Either way, they leave, and we struggle in Pennsylvania for a while. And imagine this whole time, it's a struggle mindset. We've been being programmed to think that we don't have anything. And we've been thinking that we gotta work and work and work, and it's so hard, it's so hard, it's so hard. We were not working we were actually backtracking with our spiritual hands at this point. And a lot of trauma happens, and a lot of disasters happened, and people got hurt, people died, and that was that part of the story. Okay? And now, looking back, I think of it as a challenge, to look at it as a growth experience, and not as a tear down of my character. because that builds my character. You got to have stones to build your character on. And most people that look around, they think they've gone through tough times, and they've gone through way tougher times than I have, the ones I'm looking at. But the ones they're looking at, the ones they think that they're going through tough times, they're really just sucking up to the system. You know, they're not changing things for really different good purposes. So what are you going to do? Are you really going to just be part of the system? Because that's the reason you don't feel fulfilled. Because work, the reason people feel like work is a treadmill is because they're not walking uphill. Work should be going uphill. It's the mountain of truth. It's a staircase. If you're not going up in your work, you're not going to feel like you're going anywhere. And if you're not going anywhere, you are going downhill. So just think about that before you get stuck in a career. And know that a lot of successful people didn't even finish high school. And a lot of high school people don't even finish life. And a lot of people that finish college also commit suicide. And a lot of people that don't go to college found great businesses. So know that it's your perspective. And we really need to have a different perspective no matter what situation we are in, because our perspective changes the situation that we are in. So that's me. I get a little preachy, but I hope this helps somebody. I have experienced some things that I hope nobody has to experience. And I also hope that you experience what you have to experience to actually enjoy the peaceful times in life, because a lot of people, their life sucks. Okay, so be grateful. And I hope to help people whose lives suck. And that's the main point I want to do this channel, is to project a mindset that we have enough to give to others. And the idea that we need to feel lacking is because of our mindset. Because they lack way more than we do. We're not living in the shacks. Thank God. Thank God we're not living in the shacks. You know what I mean? So, in Africa, a person's wages is $10. $10 a day is average wage of actually the planet. In Africa, people get $6 sometimes, $5. That's crazy. You know what I mean? So, before you give, $1,000 to somebody, think that you could help with half of that money 1,000 people. Just giving them $1 would be like, a couple hours of work, like hard labor, So I hope we just think of a way to even out the playing field for people and have them also think positively. Because right now they're in a stupor. In a lot of those third world countries, it's hard to even think positively because there's only negative things around you. And I know how that feels like. I've lived in literally a milk barn. And, that's where my little brother was born. I mean, thankfully, we actually found a family to help us. That was a miracle. Whatever. And that was the absolute miracle of God. But either way, we were living in a milk barn when he was born. So, when my mom... Never mind. I hope this helps whoever it needs to reach. Whoever's watched this far, thank you so much. Bye.